There's no leader in Africa right now who's the caliber of Gadaffi or caliber of Kwame Nkrumah. We have midgets running around as leaders, intellectually, I mean. No one. Mbeki was almost there, but not really. Kwame Nkrumah, Ben Bella. What did Kwame Nkrumah say? We as Ghanaians are prepared to surrender our sovereignty in part or in total in pursuit of African unity. The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the independence of the rest of the African continent. Ben Bella, what did he say? Let us die a little so that Rhodesia can be free. Let us die a little so that South Africa can be free. These were visionaries. So what I'm emphasizing is that their vision was way ahead of his time. You know, there was a big debate between Nkrumah and Nyerere in '63. Nkrumah was saying, guys, let's move very quickly and unite and be one bloc. If you get used to being a president, you will not relinquish office. Let's move quickly before you become too comfortable in your little palace as a president. And Nyerere was saying, no, let's do it brick by brick, gradually, slowly, and then we'll get there. And Nyerere won the debate. But guess what? We lost the African integration. Because everyone now wants to be president. They will never give up. Nkrumah, Gadaffi were ready to surrender individual presidency for the collective African presidency. So, yes, they made their own mistakes, but the vision of integration was there. What we need are African leaders who understand that there's more to be gained by coming together than that which is lost. Traditional knowledge systems, you know, we will address that matter if we start with ourselves before we engage China, before we engage the Russians, before we engage the Americans. We will say, we want a space program. What do we know about space as Africans? What are our views about space? What are our values? What does Ubuntu say? What is our knowledge system, our indigenous knowledge system? When you are proactive, when you start with thyself, know thyself, you'll be able to address that matter and actually leverage your own wisdom. Our problem is that we don't start with ourselves. We start with China. We start with India. We start with America and Europe. We never say, I'm an African. What is my belief system? I'm an African. What do I know about space? I'm an African. What are my views about space? What is the history in my continent in terms of understanding space? So, very important point you are raising. And in my framework, we'll solve it because we'll start with ourselves, our history, our culture, you know, as Africans, sometimes we undervalue ourselves. We think we can learn from Singapore, from Malaysia, from China. We can also learn from ourselves. Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. A person is a person because of other people. They don't have it in China. They don't have it in America. Not in Japan, but we have it. Collective success is more important than individual success. I am because we are. We are because I am. Lots of wisdom. Even when we devise and build our intelligent systems, we must input Ubuntu into our algorithms. The Americans can't do it because they don't know what Ubuntu is. So when we do the programming with Professor Marwala, we're going to be programming Ubuntu into computers. 4D, excellent 4D. Those 4Ds are great. Let's use them and empower ourselves. One thing I like from China, by the way, you know what he said? I hope you're listening. Because of nuclear weapons, because of the satellite program, we are very confident. We are balling out of control because we have nuclear weapons. They give us confidence. We are rock stars because we have satellites. You must understand this. And you know what the Americans are saying? We must stop the spreading of nuclear weapons. We must denuclearize. Do you know what happened in this country? South Africa, I hope you know this. When we're moving towards 1990, the Boers, South African racist regime, was working towards creating a nuclear weapon, a nuclear bomb. We were very close. And when Mandela and them were coming from prison, they quickly destroyed the technology and gave it to Israel. They were comfortable with the racist South African regime owning nuclear weapons, but not comfortable with an African brother having nuclear weapons. I hope you know that. So I'm emphasizing that our brothers teach us a lot. Economic power also is linked to military power. It gives you confidence. I'm not pushing for nuclear weapons. I'm pushing for satellite technology. But you must understand that when you have a satellite, when you have two bombs, one satellite, two bombs, the basis of Deng Xiaoping's revolution was strength. It gives you confidence that, no, you know what? if it comes to nuclear weapons, we will nuke each other. It's called mutually assured destruction. When the Africans have nuclear weapons, no one will take us for granted because we can nuke back. No one will mess around the Chinese because they got nuclear weapons. The Russians have nuclear weapons. The French do have them. Israel does have them. So when you are powerful militarily, you are respected. But I'm emphasizing the 4Ds. 4Ds are important. And I know that's what you've spoken about them several times. That's why I'm smiling. You are very consistent, Mr. 4D. Same culture, China. Yes, that's a good point. India, same culture. Yes, the Americans, can you say the same? They came from all over. So it's a problem, but not too big a problem. Remember, the borders are artificial borders. Do you know there are more Swazi people in South Africa than in Swaziland? Is it Eswatini? What's it called? The new name now? There are more Tswanas in South Africa than in Botswana. So these borders are meaningless. Why Swaziland is Swati? Why Botswana? Yes, there is a problem, but also the borders are artificial. We can manage our cultural differences. We can work together. You know, it's not impossible. The Germans and the French fought 2 wars. The French hate the Germans. The British don't like the Germans, but they're in the EU together, although the British is running away. But what I'm saying is don't overemphasize these cultural differences. Others have been able to manage them. And our borders are not out of our choice anyway. They were created by the Berlin Conference in 1884. So yes, there are challenges around cultural differences. They are not impossible. They can be managed and mitigated. Currency exchanges. There's always a benefit in terms of economies of scale. If we had a Pan-African currency, one currency, surely we'll be able to extract better value if we are doing the deal with the RMB or the Chinese currency, as opposed to Nigeria doing it, Rwanda, Zimbabwe. So numbers make a difference. One of the major lessons from China is a lot of people, 1.3 billion Chinese working together, economies of scale. So whatever it is, there's always a benefit in terms of economies of scale. Look, when I emphasize that we don't want bilateral deals, I'm overstating my case. What I'm simply saying is that if there's going to be a bilateral deal between South Africa and China, it must be within the context of the African agenda. We're doing this as South Africa in keeping with Agenda 2063. We're doing this as Algeria because of that decision at the AU. We're doing this thing as Zimbabwe because that's what COMESA is about. That's what the SADC position is. In other words, when we relate bilaterally, it must be informed by what is good for the region, what is good for the continent. The continent must be the starting point. The AU is weak, yes, but fix it. I'm not glorifying the AU, I'm glorifying continental integration. I told you, Nkrumah lost to Nyerere. If Nkrumah had won, if Gadaffi had won, we'll be in a different space. This creature called the AU is a compromise arrangement. It's a dysfunctional entity because Nkrumah lost. But however, let's start with the AU, the CFTA, the African framework, and fix what is wrong with it. But also we need leadership. That's why I was very harsh on the African leader. Without leadership, there will be no AU. But fix it. Don't abandon it. Technology has potential for abuse. This is the thing about technology, by the way. Any technology is a double-edged sword. If you're not careful, these dictators in Africa will be using satellite technology to monitor you and crush you when you go on demonstration, oppress you, steal your votes during elections. Yes, technology plus values is what will drive our continents. Technology on its own is not the answer. It could be the problem. It could be the issue. Social media can be antisocial. The internet is supposed to connect us, but it can also divide us. There are trolls on the internet. There's cybersecurity and insecurity. So point taken. That's why we need to start with values. Start with what we want as Africans, so that our satellites will be used for development, for economic development, not to spy on citizens or to destroy them or to oppress them. But the danger is there. Africa diaspora, very important. That's why I'm emphasizing Pan-African buy-in. Can you imagine all those African-American scientists, the African astronauts, if they're also part of our agenda, the Caribbeans, the Africans in Brazil, in Argentina, beyond the 1.3 billion on the continent. Can you imagine the expertise, the cash from Oprah Winfrey, from Michael, if they were conscious? Michael Jordan, who's conscious? Obama, who's conscious? Not these bankrupt ones we have. There is scope for buy-in and ownership if we work together as Africans across the globe. And the diaspora can give us an opportunity. By the way, I believe we can even move faster than China. I said China was able to move 400 million people from poverty over 30 years. Can you imagine our strength now? There's the ICT revolution. There's the fourth industrial revolution. Economies are globally connected. If we get our act together as Africans, probably we could actually move faster in terms of poverty alleviation than China, because when they did it from 1958, 1970, 1978 to now, these things were not there. The internet was not there. Social media wasn't there. Right now, all you need is a good brain and a computer, and you can build an empire. So I want us to learn from China. China was poor like us. China is now a rockstar economy. It can be done. Let us learn from them and work with them to become superstars. India, technology transfer, very important. We don't want to assemble. For example, here in South Africa, we assemble Mercedes-Benz, we assemble Ford, we assemble BM. We don't want that. Design your own car. Build your own car. Buy your own car. Can you imagine if we had to produce one truck in Africa, designed in Mpumalanga, called the Ubuntu car? And then at the AU, we decide that every government must buy 2,000. Already there's a market. We said 1.3 billion Africans. That's a market for our products. So technology transfer is very important. Don't just allow the Chinese to come and assemble, the Americans to come and assemble. Let us have the technology transferred to our people. Let us own the technology. Let us be entrepreneurs. Let us own the intellectual property beyond assembling, beyond using other people's technology. We can learn from India. We can learn from China. Don't tell me that AU is utopia. Don't look, first and foremost, the EU is doing very well. They have problems with Britain, but there is so much that has been achieved by the EU. The EU has done very well. NAFTA has done very well. ASEAN has done very well. There might be problems. Fix it, don't destroy it. There are lessons to learn from the EU, from ASEAN, from NAFTA. And by the way, you compare yourself with the Europeans. Europeans were never colonized and given artificial boundaries. So how dare you stick your head above your hind legs and compare the AU and the EU? The borders in Africa are not ours. Germany for the Germans, Britain for the British, French for the French, and so on. And they're coming together out of their own volition. We have artificial boundaries where there are Swazi people here, Swazi that side, the Bele people that. So in Africa, we don't have a choice, by the way, unlike the Europeans, because those boundaries are meaningless. And in any case, it's a survival issue. We will not survive under globalization as small little countries. So yes, there are challenges, but it's not utopia. Let's work hard. Let's make it happen. Let's make SADC work. COMESA, the EAC, Maghreb, ECOWAS, those blocks must function, and the AU must work. So you can't compare the challenges of NAFTA, the challenges of the AU, the challenges of ASEAN with the African continent. We have not even tried. The AU has not even tried. The United States of Africa has not been put in place. So let's not give up the fight. Let us work together and make it happen. Do you know, our colleagues are here from Russia. You know, they destroyed the USSR at the instigation of the Americans. The Americans promoted the disintegration of the USSR. I could care less the challenges they had in the USSR. They should have fixed those problems and remain united for scale. Do you realize that the biggest war that America ever fought was to keep America together? Forget First World War. Forget Second World War. Mickey Mouse wars. The biggest war fought in America was the Civil War. The South versus the North. The America versus America. They fought a vicious war, the Americans, to keep America together. The Civil War was fought to keep America together. America is big today, 325 million people, $19 trillion GDP. That unity was not cheap to keep the United States together. It was not cheap. They fought a civil war. And more people, go and Google, more people died during the Civil War in America than in the Second World War, than in the First World War in terms of Americans. Why did they do that? dying to keep the northern. Why did they break up? Why did they leave California to go on its own? No, California can be the third biggest economy on its own. They will never allow California to go free because they understand economies of scale. And yet they cheated the Russians, encouraged them to destroy the USSR. They encouraged little you and me to be fragmented. Shame on us, shame on you. Madam Africa, Mr. Africa. Last question on leapfrogging. My brother, what I'm saying is, if we are clever, if we are entrepreneurial, if we are creative, some of these sophisticated technologies will be easier to apply, cheaper to apply, and more effective in our environment because of the absence of what are called legacy problems, infrastructure legacy problems, infrastructure sunk costs. Here's the illustration. London has wires, electrical cables, telephony cables, everywhere in London, in New York. Lotito has nothing. Mpumalanga, nothing. Kumasi, zip zero. So guess what? You can go wireless power, wireless telephone, wireless everything. Which means it's easier because you have no legacy to protect. In London, in New York, they have to put the wireless infrastructure on top of the wires because they've invested in the wires. So they have to make sure somehow they leverage the infrastructure they have in place and make sure they don't lose much money from the investment. In Lotito, there's zero investment in wires. So we go satellite, we go wireless. Not because we are any better than them, but because we have nothing. So poverty becomes an advantage. Lack of development becomes an advantage. And I gave you an example of Mupesa. It doesn't mean the Americans don't know how to do Mupesa or to do EcoCash. They own the technologies. They know them better than us. But they can't commercialize it because there are so many banks. There's a bank in your bedroom. There's a bank downstairs. Why would you bank on a phone? But in a whole village, in a whole town, there's no brick and mortar bank. 80% of the people are unbanked. 80% of the people have no access to brick and mortar banking. That's poverty. But an opportunity to go mobile banking platform, an opportunity for EcoCash, an opportunity for Mupesa. I'm saying to you, look at all those elements of the fourth industrial revolution: cloud computing, quantum computing, blockchain technologies, nanotechnologies, human augmentation, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, mechatronics and robotics. Look at them and say, isn't there a way as a poor African without infrastructure, I can actually have an advantage over Japan, an advantage over New York because of my poverty? So that's what I'm emphasizing by saying, if you are clever, if you are creative, there's an opportunity to leapfrog, to skip a generation of technology, to move from the second generation technology where we are to the fourth industrial revolution. I'm saying don't lose heart because you're poor. Don't lose heart because you have no infrastructure. It could be an opportunity for you to embrace a much more advanced type of technology. So I want to end on this point of hope and say, Africans must not lose heart. There's an opportunity for us to run where others won't. But we need to learn from China. We need to learn from ourselves. We need to work together as the continent. I thank you so very much. And by the way,
you might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brother and sister, they have tried. Documented to this day, 22 coups where leaders were assassinated. France had something to do with it. The first 7, when they decided they were pulling out of the CFA and that they're going to print their own money, they were assassinated. Every time an African leader has tried to do what's best for their country, they were assassinated. Majority of them aided by France. It's a known fact. And then others, they were just mercenaries who felt that when there was a natural resource discovered in one country, they wanted to create a coup. So while the country is thrown into a civil war, they're siphoning the natural resource. We know of one particular story that had we not known about it, it would have been, oh, there we go again, the Africans. In about 25 years ago, a group of young, rich, white kids were having fun in Cape Town. They found out that there was oil in Equatorial Guinea that just been discovered, and they wanted it. So they set out a plan to have a coup in Equatorial Guinea. So while the Guineans are busy fighting a civil war, they will be siphoning the oil. But they made one mistake. There were two planes. One was to leave South Africa, stop in Zimbabwe, pick up more ammunition on their way to hunt in Equatorial Guinea. Another plane was taking off in the Caribbean that had this puppet diaspora who was supposed to be the next president. Mugabe wondered why such young people needed such powerful ammunition to go hunt in Equatorial Guinea. In doing his research further, he found out that this was a coup in the making. He allowed them to land in Zimbabwe. They loaded their plane, and just before takeoff, they were all arrested. The ringleader of that group was none other than the son of the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher. She had to fly to Zimbabwe and paid handsomely to get her son out. The last one of those prisoners left Zimbabwe about 6-7 years ago. Had these young people succeeded, it would have been another coup. There you go, the Africans again. Such, my brothers and sisters, is the story of your Africa. They don't do coups anymore. They simply create instability. So when you hear of an instability in an African country, ask yourself, what is really going on? Because what they are telling you is really going on is just a shiny object. The real issue is over here. And you need to stop before you start being used as an instrument of your own self-destruction.